March the 10th, 2024. Kensington Palace releases a photograph. A warm, smiling image of the Princess of Wales surrounded by her 3 children. It is meant to reassure a nervous public. It is meant to end weeks of mounting speculation about why the future Queen Consort has not been seen in public since the very beginning of January. It is meant to draw a line under the whispers, the rumours, the relentless online chatter that had been building for months, like pressure behind a cracked dam. It has the opposite effect. Within hours, not days, not weeks, within hours, the world's leading press agencies issue something they almost never issue. Reuters, the Associated Press, Agence France-Presse, 3 of the most powerful photographic distribution networks on the planet, simultaneously issue what is known in the industry as a kill notice, a formal retraction. They pull the photograph from their global distribution feeds and label it with 4 words that set the entire internet on fire. Source has manipulated image. Let that land for a moment. Kensington Palace, the official communications office of the second most powerful couple in the British monarchy, had released a digitally altered photograph of the Princess of Wales. Not a slightly adjusted brightness filter, not a routine crop, a manipulated image. And when the most rigorous photo authentication systems in global journalism caught it, they did not quietly reach out to the palace for clarification. They pulled it. Publicly. Formally. Decisively. The cover story collapsed. And what rushed in to fill the silence was something the palace was wholly unprepared for. The truth. Now, if you are new to this channel, welcome. Because what we do here is not gossip. What we do here is not speculation dressed up as a documentary. What we do here is forensic commentary. We follow the evidence. We follow the timeline. We follow the decisions, and we ask who made them, why they made them, and what it cost. So if that is the kind of content you have been looking for, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the bell, because this channel is going to take you places that the mainstream media either cannot or will not go. And if this video gives you something to think about, something that shifts how you see this institution, leave it a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who deserve to hear this. Now, let us begin. To understand how the palace arrived at a manipulated photograph, how one of the most powerful royal communications offices in the world ended up issuing a doctored image to a global press corps, you need to understand the pressure they were operating under. Because this did not happen in a vacuum. Nothing in the royal family ever does. December the 25th, 2023, Christmas Day. Kate, William, and their 3 children walk to the church service at Sandringham. She looks composed, elegant, warm. The image of royal stability is exactly the picture the monarchy needs the world to see. She waves to the crowds. She smiles. She is, to all external appearances, in perfect health. It is the last time the public sees her for almost 3 months. January 2024. Buckingham Palace announces that the Princess of Wales has undergone planned abdominal surgery at the London clinic. The statement is careful, controlled, deliberately, almost surgically vague. It says she is expected to remain in hospital for 10 to 14 days. It says she will not return to public duties until after Easter. It uses the word planned. It uses the phrase abdominal surgery. It says nothing beyond that. No further details, no clarification of the procedure, no indication of what they found, or did not find, or were waiting to find. In any other context, any other public figure, any other institution, a statement this deliberately incomplete would generate immediate, aggressive follow-up questions from the press. And it did. But in the context of the royal family, the vagueness generated something even more combustible than journalistic pressure. It generated public obsession. Because the British monarchy does not operate on transparency. It never has. It operates on image management. It operates on the carefully constructed projection of stability, continuity, and control. And when the image goes dark, when the meticulously curated stream of photographs and scheduled appearances simply stops, the public and the press do not extend grace. They lean in. And the longer the silence stretched, January into February, February into March, the louder the questions became. Where was Kate? Why had she not been seen? Why were there no hospital photographs, even a brief, carefully lit image from the clinic? Why was there no staged window moment, no carefully managed video message to say she was recovering well? These are things that royal communications officers know how to do. They have done them before. The fact that none of it was happening sent its own message, and the public received that message loud and clear. So by the time March arrived, Kensington Palace was not simply managing a story. They were managing a crisis. And when institutions manage crises from a place of fear rather than strategy, they make decisions that they would never make in calmer conditions. They reach for the quick fix. They reach for the image, the reassuring photograph, the warm family moment, and they release it without thinking clearly about the world they are releasing it into. Because this is 2024. This is not 1994. This is not the era when a royal photograph could be released, distributed through a single agency, and printed in the morning newspapers without anyone checking the pixel depth of the children's clothing. This is the era of global wire agencies with forensic authentication protocols. This is the era where photo editors at major news organizations run technical analysis on images before they distribute them. This is the era where the internet has millions of people with advanced photo editing software and nothing but time and suspicion on their hands. Kensington Palace released that photograph into this world. And the world tore it apart within hours. The technical inconsistencies the photo editors found were specific and damning. Anomalies in the alignment of the children's clothing, a hand position that did not correspond naturally to the arm it was attached to, layering artifacts in the background consistent with composite editing or significant post-production alteration. These are not vague impressions. These are technical findings made by professionals whose entire job is to verify photographic authenticity before distribution. And when they found what they found, they did not hesitate. The kill notice went out. The damage was instantaneous and global. Now here is where the story takes a turn that nobody in the palace's crisis communications playbook had anticipated. Rather than going silent, rather than pushing back through intermediaries or issuing a dry institutional statement, the Princess of Wales herself responded. Personally, directly. She issued a statement acknowledging that she had, as she put it, experimented with editing. She apologized for any confusion caused. She asked the public for understanding. And I want to be very clear about something here. That statement, that the decision to step forward personally and say something almost unbearably human, is not the action of an institution. That is the action of a woman who had reached a point where she needed to say something true, even if it was not the whole truth yet. Because every professional communicator in that palace knew that personal statement would not close the story. It would accelerate it. And it did. Because now the public was not simply asking where Kate was. They were asking what was being hidden. And there is a fundamental difference between those two questions. The first is a question about absence. The second is a question about deception. And once the public shifts from the first question to the second, there is no communication strategy in the world that can redirect them. The only thing that stops that question is the truth. The truth came on the 22nd of March 2024. In a video message filmed in the garden of Windsor Castle, Kate speaks directly to the camera. She is dressed simply. Her voice is measured and steady. Her eyes do not waver. But the words she delivers, carefully written, clearly rehearsed, and utterly devastating in their honesty, stop the world. She has been diagnosed with cancer. She had undergone major abdominal surgery in January of that year. During that surgery, cancer was discovered. She had been receiving preventative chemotherapy. She had not spoken publicly about her diagnosis because she was still processing it herself, and because she wanted to protect her children from the full weight of what was happening until she was ready to tell them in her own way, in her own time. In one statement, the entire architecture of the palace's communications strategy for the preceding 3 months suddenly made terrible, tragic, human sense. The vague medical statement, the absence of photographs, the long silence, the Mother's Day image that collapsed under scrutiny, all of it. Every decision that had looked like institutional arrogance or deliberate deception suddenly looked like something far more painful and far more understandable. A mother fighting cancer, trying to hold together her family's world while her own world was falling apart. And a palace trying desperately to give her the time and the space to do it. But this is the part that the institution cannot walk away from cleanly. The method they chose to buy that time and space involved releasing an altered photograph to a global press corps. And that decision, regardless of the context, regardless of the compassion we extend to the human being at the center of it, raises a question that goes to the heart of what the monarchy is and what it owes the public it exists to serve. At what point does protecting a royal family member's privacy become deceiving the public they serve? At what point does image management cross the line into institutional dishonesty? And who specifically, by name and by role, made the decision to release that photograph? That last question is the one the palace has never cleanly answered. And the reason they have not answered it is because the answer implicates not just one decision maker, but an entire system. A system of communications management that is built on the principle that the image is always more important than the truth, that the projection of stability is always worth more than the admission of vulnerability, that a well-managed lie is preferable to an unmanaged truth. That system is not new. It is as old as the monarchy itself. But what 2024 demonstrated definitively, publicly, globally, is that the system no longer works, because the world it was built for no longer exists. The immediate aftermath of Kate's announcement was, in many ways, extraordinary. The public, which had been poised on the edge of genuine anger, anger at the silence, anger at the photograph, anger at the institutional condescension of being managed, pivoted almost immediately to sympathy. Because Kate's statement was not a royal statement, it was a human statement. It was the kind of statement that strips away the institution and leaves only the person. And the person was a 30-something mother of 3, sitting in a garden, telling the world she had cancer, and asking, quietly and with enormous dignity, for privacy and for time. The outpouring of public support that followed was genuine and significant. And it demonstrated something that the palace's communications team had either forgotten or never fully understood, that the public does not need the royal family to be invulnerable. It does not need them to be above illness, above crisis, above human vulnerability. What it needs, what it has always needed, is to feel that it is being told the truth. And when Kate finally told the truth, even belatedly, even incompletely, the public responded with a warmth and a generosity that no manufactured photograph could ever have produced. Meanwhile, William was carrying the full weight of the public schedule alone. For months throughout Kate's treatment, he attended engagements solo. He travelled, he met with dignitaries, he delivered speeches, he sat through state functions and charity galas and military ceremonies, all while managing a household with 3 children, a wife in cancer treatment, and a father, King Charles, who had received his own cancer diagnosis in the same month that Kate's surgery was announced. The King of England and the Princess of Wales, both undergoing cancer treatment simultaneously, while the heir to the throne held the entire visible apparatus of the monarchy together by sheer force of personal will. I want you to think about what that actually looks like from the inside, not from the outside, where we see the pressed suits and the official cars and the carefully managed press opportunities. From the inside, from the reality of a man who is also just a husband and a son and a father, trying to function at the highest level of public life, while privately managing a level of fear and grief and exhaustion that most of us will never know. William's public demeanour during this period was notable. He became quieter, more contained. The easy warmth that had characterized his public appearances in earlier years was replaced by something harder and more deliberate. He was present, but he was operating on a different frequency. The kind of frequency that people operate on when they are running on willpower and duty, because the alternative is not available to them. Inside the palace, a different kind of reckoning was also underway. Senior advisors were asking the questions that needed to be asked, and asking them with an urgency that had not been present before the Mother's Day photograph disaster. Who authorized the release of the altered image? Was Kensington Palace the office managing William and Kate's public affairs acting independently? Or was Buckingham Palace, Charles's office, consulted? And at what level of awareness had the decision been made? Was it a junior communications error, or was it a decision taken at the highest level of royal image management? These questions have not been answered publicly. They may never be answered publicly. But the fact that they were being asked at all represented a moment of institutional reckoning that is genuinely rare in the history of the modern monarchy. Because royal institutions do not, as a rule, engage in transparent post-mortems of their own failures. They move forward. They close ranks. They manage the narrative of failure as carefully as they manage everything else. But the scale of the Mother's Day photograph collapse was significant enough, global enough, forensically verifiable enough, that the usual mechanisms of narrative management simply could not contain it. The incident crystallized something that had been building for years inside the palace walls. The rules of image control that governed the British monarchy in the 20th century, the deference of the press, the limited distribution channels, the absence of pixel-level forensic scrutiny, the absence of social media with its millions of amateur analysts. Those rules do not apply in the current media environment. They have not applied for some years, but the palace had been dangerously slow, consequentially slow, to fully accept that reality. And in 2024, that slowness cost them in a way that cannot be undone. Because the public's relationship with the royal family is built on a very particular kind of trust. Not the trust we extend to friends or family, who we know to be flawed and human. The trust we extend to institutions, a conditional, provisional trust that is entirely dependent on the institution behaving in ways that justify it. And when an institution is caught releasing a manipulated image during a health crisis affecting one of its most beloved members, that conditional trust takes a hit, from which it does not fully recover. The sympathy for Kate personally was real and enormous, but the sympathy did not entirely erase the question mark that now sat alongside every future image, every future statement, every future carefully managed moment of royal communication. Who decided? And why did they think it would work? Across the Atlantic, Harry and Meghan watched these events unfold from California. And their response, or more precisely, their non-response, was itself significant. Because Harry Sussex has demonstrated on numerous occasions a willingness to speak into moments of royal crisis in ways that are calibrated to maximum impact. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the memoir. Each of these was timed with a precision that suggests strategic communications awareness, regardless of how they were presented publicly. But during Kate's illness, there was silence from Sussex. No public statement, no interview, no carefully placed source whispering to a sympathetic journalist. Silence. And that silence was striking precisely because it was so uncharacteristic. What it suggests, and this is forensic commentary, not guesswork, is that even Harry understood that the battlefield had to go quiet. That to use Kate's cancer diagnosis as a moment of further institutional criticism would have been a reputational catastrophe from which there was no recovery. So he said nothing. And in saying nothing, he demonstrated a situational awareness that is worth noting. But it did not change the underlying dynamic. If anything, the events of 2024 deepened the fracture between the two branches of the Windsor family in ways that are structural rather than personal. Because what 2024 demonstrated is that William and Kate, in their vulnerability, received the full weight of institutional support, imperfect, flawed, sometimes catastrophically misjudged support, but support nonetheless. Harry and Meghan remain outside that structure, permanently and by choice. And the question of whether that distance costs them more than it gives them is one that 2024 answered with some clarity. By the latter part of 2024, Kate had returned to selective public engagements. The Wimbledon women's final in June, Trooping the Colour, the Christmas Day walkabout at Sandringham. Each appearance was carefully chosen. Each was brief by royal standards. Each was a statement not simply about her personal health and recovery, but about the monarchy's capacity to endure. Because that is what every public appearance by a senior royal always is. Underneath the waving and the bouquets and the polite conversation with local dignitaries. It is a statement of institutional continuity. We are here. We are still standing. The institution survives. The Wimbledon appearance specifically was significant, because Wimbledon is one of those uniquely British occasions where the royal presence is not merely ceremonial, but genuinely beloved. And when Kate appeared in that royal box, composed, smiling, wearing white, looking like someone who had come through something enormous and emerged on the other side, the reaction from the crowd was not the polite applause that royals typically receive. It was something more visceral. It was the sound of a public exhaling, of people who had been worried for someone they felt they knew, finally being allowed to stop worrying. It was a relief rendered as noise. But here is the long-term consequence of 2024 that nobody inside the palace wants to articulate clearly. When William becomes king, and he will become king, likely within our lifetimes, possibly within the next decade, he will carry the lessons of this year with him into his reign. Not as abstract institutional knowledge, not as a case study reviewed in a communications briefing, but as lived, personal, permanent knowledge. He saw in real time what happens when the machinery of royal communications fails. He felt the consequences of that failure in the most private and painful areas of his life. He watched his wife, the person he has chosen to build his life with, become the subject of global speculation and forensic scrutiny at the moment she was most vulnerable. That experience shapes a person. It shapes the decisions they make and the instincts they trust. The question is, what shape it has given William specifically? Does it produce a more transparent future monarch? A king who, having seen the cost of institutional concealment, chooses a different model? One that is more candid, more proactive, more willing to share the human reality of royal life, rather than managing it into a performance. There is evidence that William's instincts do lean in that direction. His willingness to speak publicly about mental health, his involvement in Earthshot, his increasing willingness to engage with policy areas in ways that his father's generation of royals largely avoided. These suggest a man who understands that the monarchy's survival depends not on the perfection of its image, but on the relevance of its purpose. But there is another possibility, that the instinct to protect, the same instinct that led someone in Kensington Palace to release an altered photograph rather than admit that the princess was seriously ill, simply gets more sophisticated under William's reign. The lesson learned from 2024 is not that transparency is preferable, but that the existing mechanisms of concealment are insufficiently advanced for the current media environment. And so, the response is not greater openness, but greater technical capability, better image management, smarter story control, a more forensically rigorous version of the same fundamental instinct. That would be the wrong lesson. And the people around William, the advisors, the communications professionals, the courtiers, will play a significant role in determining which lesson he takes forward. Because here is the truth that sits at the center of everything the palace managed, mismanaged, and barely survived in 2024. The British public's connection to the royal family is not based on their perfection. It never has been. The moments of genuine public affection for the monarchy, the moments that produce that sound at Wimbledon, that warmth at Sandringham, that collective exhale of relief, are not produced by flawless image management. They are produced by human recognition. By the sense that behind the institution, there are real, flawed, suffering, resilient, genuinely trying people, and that those people, in their humanity, reflect something true about us. Kate's video statement in March 2024 produced that recognition. Not because it was perfectly managed, but because it was true. Because a woman looked into a camera and said something that no communication strategy could have scripted. Because no communication strategy would have allowed it. I have cancer. I am frightened. I am processing this. Please give me time. That is not a royal statement. That is a human statement. And it connected with the public in a way that 1,000 perfectly composed, forensically unchallenged, beautifully lit photographs could never have achieved. The institution that produced the manipulated photograph, and the institution that eventually allowed Kate to speak her truth, are the same institution. They will be the same institution next year, and the year after that, and for the next 50 years of William's eventual reign. The question that 2024 leaves unanswered is the question that I am putting to you directly, right now, at the end of this video. Is which version of that institution we are going to get? The one that reaches for the altered image when the truth becomes too difficult to manage? Or the one that finally, permanently, understands that in the world we now live in, the truth, however painful, however complicated, however humanly messy, is always the only strategy that works? Kate is recovering. Charles is in treatment. William is carrying the crown before it has formally been placed on his head. And the institution that failed so publicly in March 2024 is the same institution that will define the British monarchy for the next half-century. So I want to ask you, the person watching this right now, where do you stand on this? Should the royal family be held to a higher standard of transparency than any other public figure? Or does a person's right to medical privacy, even a future queen's, outweigh the public's right to know? Is there a version of the monarchy that can genuinely balance those two things? Or is the very structure of royal institutions incompatible with the kind of honesty that a modern democratic public has the right to expect? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and this particular question is going to generate a conversation I genuinely want to be part of. And if this video gave you something, if it shifted how you see this story, if it filled in something that the mainstream coverage missed, then please subscribe to this channel right now. Because the story of the British monarchy in this era is not over. Not even close. Next, we are going into the Andrew standoff, the legal settlements, the access that was quietly revoked, and the titles that were quietly retained, and what that tells us about how this family actually makes decisions when the cameras are off. Then we are going into the Harry legal war, the phone hacking cases, the settlement, and the question of who knew what and when in the British tabloid industry. And then we are going into Camilla, the power shift that nobody in the palace saw coming, and the way one woman quietly repositioned herself from the monarchy's greatest liability into one of its most effective operators. This channel is just getting started, and if you have been looking for royal commentary that actually follows the evidence, that does not just repeat what Kensington Palace wants you to believe, then this is where you stay. Subscribe, tap the bell, and I will see you in the next one.